Hi everyone! Before we officially start the presentation, I wanted to introduce you all to the artist and how much his art has impacted other artists after him. It is important to recognize this impact Leonardo da Vinci had on art and culture throughout history, and not just during his lifetime. Leonardo da Vinci is an inspiration to all artists, present and past. When people think of art, most often the first artist to come to mind is Leonardo da Vinci. He created his own style, which you will hear about later, and it can be argued that he, his art, and his life defined the Renaissance time period. Hi everyone, I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. Today you'll be watching our group's presentation on one of the world's most famous artists, Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was born in Florence, Italy on April 15th in 1452. Italy was the starting place as well as the heart of the Renaissance, so it was the perfect place for an artist to grow up. He was first introduced to art as a whole at the age of 15. His father sent him to be an apprentice to the artist Andrea del Verrocchio. Working with Verrocchio for 10 years, Leonardo da Vinci trained in both painting and sculpting while working in the workshop. After working with Verrocchio, da Vinci moved to Milan in 1482 to work for the city's duke. During the 17 years he was in Milan, he was listed in the register as a painter and engineer for the duke. It is not a surprise that a wealthy man hired him, as during the Renaissance, many of the powerful people wanted to show their wealth through owning art. These people were called patrons of the arts. One of the works he completed during his time in Milan is one of the world's most well-known paintings, The Last Supper, which da Vinci worked on from 1495 to 1498. Up in the top corner of this slide is a photo of Leonardo da Vinci himself. About his art. Like I said before, da Vinci is most famous for his artwork, in which he both painted and sculpted. Later in the presentation, you all will see some of his most popular works. Despite being an artist, he was also interested in science and the human anatomy, which we know from the drawings and sketches found in his sketchbooks. Many people accredit the realism in his work to the studies he did on the human anatomy. He was one of the first to dissect the human body. Da Vinci's art is classified in the High Renaissance style, among other artists like Michelangelo and Raphael. This style defined the time period perfectly. Leonardo da Vinci's art, just like that of many other artists during the time, took inspiration from the classical Greek and Roman art. This art also reinforced the ideals that the Renaissance brought about, mainly humanism. Da Vinci's art contrasted greatly from the Gothic style of the previous era. His style is defined by its realism, perspective, accuracy, and overall beauty.
The Mona Lisa is arguably Da Vinci's most famous work of art. The painting depicts a young woman against an imaginary landscape. Da Vinci used a technique of painting called sfumato, which allows colors and tones to blend together, giving the final work a soft, hazy appearance. This technique also contributes to the atmospheric perspective of the painting by showing distance in the background by losing sharpness and detail with objects further away. The realisticness of the woman's strands of hair and the folds in her clothing are enhanced by Da Vinci's use of sfumato. The blending of colors, especially between contrasting light and dark shades, creates a value contrast similar to that of real life. The piece has an overall sense of harmony constructed by the similar tones throughout the painting. Da Vinci's idea that humanity and nature are linked is apparent in the woman's smile. The Mona Lisa's smile became famous because of its unusual effect of changing depending on where the viewer looks. Historically, the Mona Lisa was monumental and changed the standards of all future portraits. Instead of the typical side portrait view, Da Vinci used a three-quarter view, which became the standard for all portraits well into the 21st century. Here, you can see the Mona Lisa painting, and the way that the sfumato technique enhanced the subject. The rivers and valleys behind her are hazy, while the Mona Lisa herself is quite clear. Notice her clothing, especially her right sleeve, and the way Da Vinci uses light to convey its texture. And finally, her expressionless eyes and soft smile, which make her face so hard to read. The Last Supper by Da Vinci is a painting that depicts Jesus and his 12 disciples the night before his crucifixion. The most important technique the painter employs is linear perspective. Linear perspective is used by artists of 2D works to create a sense of space. This depth is constructed by using a horizontal line, convergent lines, and one or more vanishing points. In The Last Supper, there's only one vanishing point, located on Jesus' right temple, which draws the viewer's eye to the subject and alludes to the air of importance around the character. However, the expressions of the faces of the disciples should not be ignored when viewing this piece. As the eye moves from the left or the right of the painting, the concerned, somber, and alarmed expressions of Jesus' colleagues can be interpreted and understood as the mood and feel of the work. Here is Leonardo da Vinci's painting The Last Supper. What was the first thing you saw when the slide changed? Was it the figure at the center of the table, which is supposed to represent Jesus? Yes, that is because of Da Vinci's use of linear perspective. Also notice the panic and concern on the faces of his disciples, while Jesus himself holds a somber expression, which shows the viewer that he already knows his fate of crucifixion.
Right, so the last piece of art we're going to take a look at is called The Virgin and Child with St. Anne and St. John the Baptist. So in this painting, there is a depiction of St. Anne with her daughter Mary and the infant Jesus. The primary technique used in this work of art is called chiaroscuro, which is essentially the use of light and shadow to create the illusion of light from a specific source shining on the figures in the painting. So this creates an illusion of three-dimensional figures. And as you will see in the next slide, the figures are arranged in a triangular shape with St. Anne as the top point, which emphasizes the fact that she is the primary focus of the painting as well as the central figure. So here's the painting itself. You can see the chiaroscuro I mentioned before, the use of the light and the shadow, and you can see the 3D effect, and you can also see the triangular orientation that the artist decided to put these characters in. So a little bit about Leonardo da Vinci's influence in the world. So he was very influential back in his day and present day. There's a website below that basically explains some of the attributes that he made to modern day art, life, and culture. So some of those attributes we're going to talk about are bringing light to the human anatomy. So if any of you have heard of the Vitruvian Man, basically that is what Da Vinci created to emphasize the spatial orientation of different body parts in a person. He also foreshadowed later inventions such as air travel. He attributed to military engineering and studied more everyday objects. So here are some fun facts about Da Vinci. So interestingly enough, Da Vinci wasn't just interested in art. He was heavily interested in science. He loved writing about paleontology in his notebook, as well as the anatomy of the human body. His sketches on the human body were very detailed, as he was able to dissect bodies and look at them. And also, Da Vinci loved to sketch and come up with unique inventions in his book. So his interest in flight caused him to come up with ideas for what was essentially the first helicopter, which is a pretty cool fact. So now we have some trivia. So I'm going to read each question and then pause for a little bit so you can think about it and write your answer down. Then I will move on. So number 1 asks, what is the name of the technique that Da Vinci used in Mona Lisa, specifically in the curves of her hair and clothing? Number 2 asks, at what age was Da Vinci introduced to artistry? And lastly, number 3 asks, due to the linear perspective used in the Last Supper, Jesus could be considered the... All right, so now for the answers. So the answer to number 1 was C. Number 2 was B. and number 3 was A. I hope you enjoyed that trivia, and here's our Works Cited page. Thank you guys so much for listening, and have a great day.